So wait. You're saying two PTs to one PTA?
Yeah, ideally, we want to maintain. So essentially, the first 3 of your hires should be a PT before we even touch a PTA, because we want something that essentially looks and functions just like the owner if the goal is to give the owner freedom.
So, Joey, I want to right out of the gate, I want to talk about Florida. Florida is, you have an event. It's in Orlando, April, did you say 24th?
Yep, April 24th through the 26th is when it is. So in Orlando, we've got quite a few people that are going to be there. So we've got us with Rehab CEOs, so marketing, consulting side of things. Then we have Empower EMR, so one of the EMR companies out there. We got Comprehend, which is a AI scribe. We have Will Humphreys. His is more, he does a lot of stuff. I mean, he does stuff all over. He's had billing company. He's done stuff for roll-ups. He's done stuff. I think his main thing he's focusing on now is placing VAs for front office, because I don't know anybody who's like, I really love having more front office that are expensive, and we have a lot of administrative stuff. So Will's helping with that. And then we have the guys from PT Billing, because of course you got to get paid. So there's the billing side of things. So a pretty big group of people with a lot of really kind of big guy kind of energy there. Pretty much everybody there is established with very like multi locations, and there's people ranging that are going to be there from 1 to, I think the most we have that's going to be there has 14 locations. A big emphasis on kind of the bigger guys on this one.
Where are you guys going to be? Is it like a convention center? Is it a hotel? Where are you doing it?
The Hilton Orlando is where we're at. If it's anything like personal life, my wife pretty much keeps the calendar and I show up. I sit there and try to look pretty is what I do. But yeah, it's at the Hilton Orlando.
So I watch all these reels. My wife sends me reels, and like every reel is the husband that just was told where to be, what to do, who to do it with. And 30 seconds later is like, so what's going on tonight? What are we doing?
Yeah.
That is totally me. She's got Google calendars with everything listed in 15-minute increments. I don't even have Google Calendar on my phone. She was like, how do you survive? I'm like, because of you. Seriously, because of you. All right, so that's awesome. Like, and I know Jimmy knows Empower, and we all know Will. There are a lot of people that we know and respect go into that. Before we got on now, Joey was telling me about some of the things that he sees in private practice, and without shaming anybody, everything that Joey was sharing with me is stuff that we've lived, stuff that we've been through. I've shared this story. Like when I originally came into Ohio, I was invited to join a spine center. They had a outside third-party consultant coming in. They had 2 spine surgeons, anesthesiology, massage therapy, chiropractic, psychology. They were investing millions, bought a building, did all this stuff. Everything completely collapsed within about 1.5 to 2 years. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, everything collapsed. And it all came down to, there was one billing person, Joey, you'll get a kick out of this, one billing person that was the same billing person when it was just the spine surgeon. This one billing person now was responsible for all of these providers coming in. They did not build out any infrastructure for this new entity. They hired everyone, brought them all in. Nobody was submitting claims. They found boxes and boxes of claims, paper claims, that never got submitted, never got sent. The anesthesiologist never got credentialed with the new group, so none of those claims were getting paid. It was just a complete nightmare, but everybody was so excited about the growth and the center and all the stuff going on. Nobody looked under the hood to say, hey, there's no engine in this car. Like literally, remember the old Volkswagen Bugs? You'd open the front hood and there was no engine because it was in the back. Give us a little context. What are some of the things that small and mid-sized practice owners are realizing when somebody looks under the hood and they're not making a profit and they don't know why?
I mean, there can be a lot of different things. If we're going down the billing route here, a lot of times it's because when at one point we had enough billing in-house, and then we added 3 therapists and we kind of forgot that you also need to add billing accordingly. Or it was someone who kind of had baseline foundations and there was some oversight by the owner more because they had time and bandwidth to do that. And then all of a sudden you get slammed and now there's all these other things. And now the oversight that caught a lot of those errors is no longer there anymore. And you have someone, and then 6 months later, you replace that person who didn't actually learn from all those mistakes before. And all of a sudden we have new people there. And so when we start to look at like all of this type stuff, really ratios are one of the things that are probably out of whack for a lot of people. So when I say ratios, typically, like when we look at different ratios, there's like PT to PTA ratios, there's PT to tech ratios, and then there's front office to PT ratio, and then there's billers to claims ratios. And usually they're out of whack on pretty much every single one of these. And so like you'll see some, if you get to people that are doing like 30-minute kind of treatments, that's typically in like your New York, your Florida, like all your places with terrible reimbursement. They're typically almost a 1-to-1 ratio when you go to 30. So then their expenses end up being like $2,000 more per full-time provider because they have a tech with each one. And so when you actually start looking at that in the units, then they're effectively might as well just switch to different scheduling because they're just giving away all their money. And now they feel like a can of sardines there. Like that's the like tech to PT ratio. PT to PTA, I know you're breaking this one, Tony. I always give you a hard time on this, but like typically we want to maintain at least a 2-to-1 ratio of PT to PTA ratio. So that way we don't have to feel like a workhorse doing the evals for everybody. People can take breaks and stuff like that. That's
so wait. You're saying 2 PTs to 1 PTA?
Yeah, ideally we want to maintain. So essentially the first 3 of your hires should be a PT before we even touch a PTA. Because we want something that essentially looks and functions just like the owner if the goal is to give the owner freedom. And if we hire nothing but PTAs, like I have one right now, she had 3.5 PTAs and she's like, I haven't been able to take a vacation in years. And her mom had gotten sick and she was having a hard time taking off work because she's the one that keeps everything kind of fueled there. Yeah. And so it's 3 PTs to eventually have a PTA. And then from there, once you hire that PTA, we want to try to maintain a 2-to-1 ratio if possible. The more rural you are, that becomes a little bit harder and stuff like that. So it is what it is. And then when you're looking at other ratios, like essentially front office staff, and this is not including billing, front office staff can manage about 110 visits a week as far as how many they can have before they do. So roughly 2 full-time providers is what they can kind of actually support. And so when you look at the billing side of things, they can handle about 240 to 300 claims a week, kind of depending on the complexity of your payers and stuff like that. And so what normally happens is, like I was just talking to one that had, like, I won't say specific numbers so they don't know that I'm talking about them, but let's say they have like 9 FTEs. And so for them, they had 3 front office people, but one of them was effectively only focusing on billing and 2 of them were for the front office stuff. And so if you look at them, they were doing 45-minute scheduling. And so when you actually do the math of that, we'll say, okay, 9 times 50, which is about how many you can see if you're doing there. So 450 visits a week. And so if we're at 450 a week, then realistically, we need 4 front office people just for scheduling and all of the like stuff there. That doesn't include billing. And so if you're looking at 450 a week, that also means you need 2 full-time billers. And so typically what happens is you'll feel like you're saving money. Either you start to have AR issues, stuff doesn't get submitted, stuff doesn't get actually the right modifiers. Half the time the actual issue is like name, phone number, email address, like all the stuff that actually has to be part of a chart doesn't end up happening because they're busy and they're like, I'll get to that later. And so it's not even an actual true billing issue. It's like just a mistake because they're slammed. Or what ends up happening is they end up having drop-offs, no-shows, cancels. They don't follow up with the patient that's there and all those things. And so they either go way heavier into the billing and then the scheduling falls apart, or they focus way heavier on the scheduling and then the billing falls apart. And so usually it's one or the other. In some cases, it's both. And it's just like, oh my God, how do we fix this thing? But it's the ratios that are typically out of whack, which is why I'm not like the biggest proponent of in-house billing, because what ends up happening is you hire and you're like, this is awesome, super good margins. You're actually like overstaffed a little bit, but maybe a little bit heavy on the when you actually look at the salary compared to the revenue, the percentage, it may be perfect. But then you grow and now you're like, oh crap, now we're understaffed. So now you need to go hire again. Well, now you're over leveraged and you're actually like 8 to 10% of your revenue is actually in salaries of billers. So it's like, I could just pay a professional that does nothing but this all day. But just like realtors, just like CPAs, just like a lot of things, for every 1 good biller, there's probably 10 terrible ones. Yeah. And people are a little bit scared of it. So that's what I see like all the time. Like if I see billing in-house, I'm like, we need to do an AR audit. They're like, well, our AR is good. I'm like, no, we just need to do it. I just assume it's terrible until proven otherwise. That's pretty much what I see.
Jimmy, now this is stepping into your world a little bit. What are you thinking about when he says that?
Well, newly into my world, right? Like I didn't even know what RCM was 6 months ago, right? I had no idea and didn't care. And like, frankly, like sort of don't care, except what can it do if you get it right? Right. Like, so like, do I want the nuance in the spreadsheet? No. Like working for Athelus, like I'm not like, I can't wait to talk to you about the 26 steps in the billing process. Like I can wait to talk to you about that. But like you said, if you find one person who knows how to do it well, like this is an automation. Like this is something that a person can set up systems to run. So when I hear people have proportions out of whack, or they know something's wrong, but they're not changing it, this is an emotional issue. This is a psychological, like, you know, something's wrong. You feel overwhelmed. You've decided not to fix it. So you didn't. And then that's why the boat sinks. The boat sinks is not most of the time, not because of the leak we don't know, but the leak we know that we say we're going to fix later. So like, this is where I get excited for like bringing in things like automation, because should a person know the 26 steps of the billing cycle? Like they should know them, and they should know what machine is running them through. So those things get done and to get done efficiently. Because you're right. You shouldn't be paying 10% on getting paid. Like that is a lot of money, like a dollar for every 10, a dime for every dollar to get paid. Like, oh, that's a kick in the bad place.
So let me ask you this. Every time we have you on, we always end up talking about hiring, recruiting. Last time we were talking about clinicians. What are your thoughts on the idea that, you know, the business that Jimmy's working for a company, the company is 3 people, the 2 founders and Jimmy. Now the company is growing to 6 people, to 10 people, to 15 people. My experience, Jimmy is probably not still the best candidate for the 15-person company like he was with the 3-person company. Mm-hmm. When we talk about bringing on admin, bringing on, you know, internal people to support the clinical side of things, are you seeing clinicians do better bringing in new people to kind of take new leadership roles, or are they only bringing in people at the bottom and then bringing them up as the business grows? Any content for that?
Are we talking on the clinician side, or are we talking on the
admin side? Admin side.
I think it really depends on the person, because I've seen it, and usually when I ask this stuff, anytime I'm on a call with a potentially like a new client, I'll say, cool, do you have an office manager and do you have a clinical director? Usually they'll say, yeah, I do. And then they name one person. I'm like, okay, so we haven't delineated this role. So one, that's typically not how we want it. So we want someone who's on back, someone who's on the front. I'm like, cool. So what do they do? And they're like, well, like they manage the other front office person. I'm like, okay, cool. What does manage mean to you? And they're like, well, like they tell them what to do. And I'm like, are they doing hiring, training, performance reviews? Are they doing like some type of audits on their stuff? They're like, no, I do that. I'm like, awesome. So you don't have an office manager. I said, you've paid someone the title of that. And so sometimes we have to actually de-title someone in some of these scenarios. But I usually ask them, it's like, knowing this is what they should be doing, do you have anybody on your team that inherently could fit that role long-term in your eyes? And most of the time there's a really long pause, and then they say, well, that's usually how it starts. And then they'll say, I think so-and-so would be good. And then they start to give some type of actual characteristic traits that means they work hard, they try hard, they mean well, all of those softeners for the fact that they're actually not the right fit. And so those are typically the conversations that we have. And I find a lot of times in most cases, you can find that person internally and you train them. The issue is most people aren't good at training them. And so if you don't have someone like this is a shameless plug, like we have training for office manager, for patient care coordinator, like we can train that person if they are trainable. But if they don't have those things, most people would probably actually benefit from hiring the role versus actually trying to train it, because that would assume that the owner actually knows what's supposed to be being done with that role and has time to train them and hold them accountable to it. And most of the time they do not. And so if anything, I would say who already has a proven track record of doing this, and then let them do that. But that doesn't mean just because they have 10 years of experience that they know how to do it. That could be essentially 10 years of doing it wrong.
Right. 1 year experience 10 times. I mean,
yeah.
Those are deadly, because they come in with a buff chest.
Yeah. And they a lot of times have bad habits and stuff like that you now have to break. And so the big thing you look at is, you have to actually get some type of way to assess for the skills that they actually have to have there. And I think that's the biggest thing is most people don't. They just go based off of like, do they seem like a good culture fit, which is good. But if you're trying to pay someone to inherently come in, batteries included, effectively, then you want to make sure that they've done the job, they know how to do it, and they can just be pointed in the right direction, they're going to do it. I will also say when you go the actual kind of leadership and promoting within, I do find a lot of times they need a lot of coaching on essentially how to hold what used to be a peer accountable. Yeah. Because now all of a sudden they went from a buddy to all of a sudden you're now holding me accountable. I don't like this dynamic.
Right.
And so I think it's probably 50-50 if I said like how it ends up working out typically within the clinics we're in. But it kind of depends on like who they already have in that role. But usually it's like so-and-so was with me since day one. So like they hold on to that person for forever. Yeah. But like it's very uncommon when someone, I think there's actually a stat on this. When a company doubles more than twice, I think only 70% of the staff actually are still there.
Yeah. Yeah. We were never able to really bring somebody through as the company grew. You know, our A players at 3-person company were definitely not happy. They weren't satisfied. They weren't fulfilled when we were a 10-person company and then a 20-person company. And even like right now, I mean, we're going through another transition. We're always transitioning. It seems like we had downsized. Nobody was at the front desk. We were trying to automate things. We were trying to treat all the patients, do all the billing, do everything. We're like, we cannot sustain this. My wife comes back into the practice. First time in 17 years, she's coming back into the practice. I think she was thinking, well, I'm going to come treat patients because you got more patients than you guys can handle. We don't need help treating patients. We need help like calling new patients back, scheduling patients, admitting patients into the EMR. Like, and then layer 2 is, okay, we need to build our systems again. We are in a completely different business today than we were even 2 years ago. You guys know this. We went from paper documentation to electronic. Well, that means we need new systems. We need new procedures. We need new policies. We need to figure out how to grease these wheels so that it's not 50 different clicks to admit a new patient, but we can make this more efficient. My wife, I mean, she's brilliant. She's a genius. Like she can come in and she thrives on figuring out how to make a bad system better. It's hard to find that, you know, like how do you hire and how do you afford to pay somebody what they need to make them feel valued, but who has the creative side of saying, look, I'm coming into a train wreck and we're going to figure out how to turn this around, because it's not like you can just hire somebody at minimum wage to answer the phones. You really need that creative person who loves making things better, who loves fixing problems on the admin side. Have you guys found any kind of, you know, way to attract that kind of person?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, it's just like on the clinical side, we have to essentially show them what the actual progression is for them within the company. So I think one of the biggest things, like we have one in Tennessee, they were having issues with, they've got 7 locations, I think 36 FTEs. And for them, they kept having issues with trying to actually maintain their front office staff. They just kept churning. And they're like, I don't know why. Because like in general, they keep everybody else. And so they're like, we have good culture. We've got all these 5-star reviews. Everybody seems to love working here, but we keep churning. And we're like, well, it's because you don't have a dissension plan. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, just like you do with your PTs, like they need to know where their career is. Otherwise, in a lot of cases, they see it's much easier to go switch somewhere else and just get a $3 lift. And so I did actually see a thing talking about a curve of how used to the actual best way to get more of a money was to switch jobs. That like went up really, really heavy. And then now it's actually coming back down. And so it's actually calibrated again to people realize that all the ways of making money was the best way to switch a job. And now they're like, oh, it's actually not. And it's calibrating back again. Right. And so I think over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see a little bit more loyalty from people. But I think having an actual ascension plan of like, hey, this is where you're at. These are the roles and responsibilities. This is what 1 year looks like, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and actually doing that. But then the other thing is actually pouring into these people. I think the biggest thing is I think we've thought if we come in, we do these things, we're going to be seen as micromanaging. But like realistically, players, they don't see it as micromanaging. They see it as caring, actually being held accountable. And so like for us, we have what's called Front Office Success Academy. So like we literally train all of our clients front office to help with a lot of these things. And it was kind of shocking because originally you kind of think front office is like someone that doesn't really like care as much. They're there to check in, check out. But like there's a whole community. So like we do coaching calls, we do training. There's a community where they can ask their questions and all that. It's more active than the PT side on all this type stuff. And like they want to learn. They're asking questions. They're like happy to get on and do role playing to overcome someone not wanting to pay a deductible and like all of these different things. And it's very, very different than what I thought before we started kind of putting way more of our focus on staff training. And so I think if you truly pour in, they also realize if you do it right, it changes the kind of person they are personally. Like I've literally had people tell us, they're like, I feel like a different person, not just like inside of like our practice and stuff like that. It's like, I'm actually like knowing how to communicate, knowing how to kind of emphasize these things that are really going to make me a different person and have more confidence in these things. And I'm having better conversations with my husband, with my family, like all of those type things. And so I think realistically, you can grow all of these things and people will do that. But I think that's why it's also good to have feedback. Like I think overwhelmingly owners do not get feedback because they're afraid of what they're going to hear. And so like the very first thing we do when we start with a clinic is we do a staff survey. It's usually brutal on the front end because it's like they hear like, I don't know what the core values are. I don't know if I can trust the team. They're changing things all the time. I can't trust on so-and-so to do this. And like it's usually like a kind of a punch to the face with some of our owners. But like the good owners are like, oh my God, now I know what I can actually fix. I didn't know that was a name. Yeah. Or they're like, who do you think would be good for leadership? And like everybody's saying like Susan. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about Susan because like Susan's a PTA. And I'm like, well, what does that matter? And so like, there's so much of that like you can just instill these things in place. And then it's just feedback. You get feedback, you improve and you do it again. Yeah. But a lot of times there's just not good process to get that feedback to continue training them over.
Jimmy, have you been involved in any, you guys do audits and stuff. Have you been involved in any yet?
Like financial audits? No,
yeah.
That's not yet just because I'm new, but we did this in radio. Like you want to talk about growth. You're different as a one-person runner in a marathon than you are as a two-person tennis doubles team, as you are as a five-person basketball team, as you are as a nine-person baseball team. Like you could be a great athlete in all those different sports, but your role changes. And if it doesn't, you're playing first base on a soccer field. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I had a great sales manager who used to say, like, first, understand the game we're playing. Because if I'm here playing hockey and you think we're playing figure skating, we both have skates on and I'm scoring goals but have no points. So it doesn't make any sense. So understand what game we're playing and then what position am I playing? Is it clear what position I'm playing? Because I thought the whole time my job was to do ABC. Meanwhile, you're over there with your door closed in your office and you're mad at me because Jimmy's bad at his job. But meanwhile, I thought I was doing great. Like this is like we boil all these things down to communication issues and emotions. And as dumb as that sounds, believe me, 25-year-old Jimmy would have been like, this all sounds new agey. I don't like it. This is a business problem. And I'm like, well, who you got in your business? People, and people have emotions and they bring them with them to work and they carry over. And it can be dangerous. I've worked for big, big companies that were small and went big. If you look at my resume, I think you can figure out which company I'm talking about. That got huge. And then the people at the top would say, I want feedback. We want critical feedback. And you'd give it, and then they'd reject it. I mean, we worked for one company who brought in a 6-figure organization to do essentially a DNA audit of their company. Like, we're good at this size, but we want to get to this size. This size. How do we get there? Because as you scale, it's not linear. And they took all this feedback and they didn't do anything. Yeah. Because they didn't like it. These are smart people making emotional decisions and with emotional reactions. It's funny.
All right. Well, I already kept Joey longer than I told him.
Wait, one more. Scott's got a question. What's your staffing solution during busy season? Scott's in Florida. volumes can be seasonal. Florida's a unique place. All the nuts roll downhill to Florida, right?
Yeah.
You guys are rolling down to Florida too. Seasonal, difficult to manage without temp staff, which is not ideal, but it's something he's got to deal with. What are your 2 cents on seasonal?
I'm not a big fan of hiring just for seasonal. I'm a fan of trying to figure out why it's seasonal. So I know that sounds silly and you're like, people move, but like we've got probably
Hashtag Florida.
We've got 40 locations or so that are in Florida. So like you don't have to have a slow season. I think that's the actual myth is why are we still not full during those times? It's like, yes, there's less people, but like, is there still not enough people to stay full during that time?
Florida's a pretty populated state.
Yeah, it's going to be busy no matter what. So it's like, do we have proper SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, past patient marketing, in-person networking? Do we have proper physician referrals? And so I typically in the, how do we solve for the fact of, will you see a drop in census? Yes. Should it be enough to where you're like, I've got to let people go because all of a sudden people are gone and all that? No, there's no world where that should be a thing. We should also be looking at what's called pre-booking. So like you should be scheduling out minimum 6 weeks of the people's actual plan of care. So that way you actually have a little bit more consistency because it's not just Florida. It's like Arizona, it goes 108 degrees. They see like a 20% decrease in census because people are like, I'm going to melt if I go outside. And so New York has the exact inverse of Florida's snowbird season. And so the more you can do like this pre-booking, because you should know that at least 60% of your people are willing to book out 6 visits of their plan of care from the day of their eval. And if you do that, you now have a little bit more kind of guidance on how much you will have as we start to slow down. And then you start planning workshops, you start planning reactivations, you start doing more ads during the time that you know is going to be slow. So the first step is just like, look at all your visits, evals, all that type stuff historically over the last 3 years. You'll now know exactly where is the slow season start. And then 2 weeks ahead of that, start planting all of these marketing efforts. So that way you can stay full during this time. So that's kind of what I would start to look at. But it is always good to have, like, as you get bigger, you should probably have a PRN person just always ready in the wing, because you've got people who have kids, who get sick, who want to have holidays, all that type stuff. And for every week you have someone that's not taking up that spot, that's $5,000 a week in revenue that you're missing because you don't have someone to backfill it. And what typically happens is the owner's the one that backfills it. And then all of a sudden they can't focus on the business. So like you should have someone that you have ready to kind of come in at any moment. So I think it's good to have it, but I don't think we should be dependent on it, even if we're in a state like Florida. But that was a good question.
I dropped the link to your event. And just for people doing the listening, it is called the P3 PT Millionaire Conference. Unlock the P3 formula. Get more providers, patients, and profits. I'm seeing the 3 Ps. And in lovely Orlando, Florida, April 24th to the 26th. It is at the Hilton. Make sure you show up to the right hotel, Joey.
All right, Joey. We always appreciate you coming on, man. You share so much great information. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. We'll see you next time.